We've all heard of the Bermuda Triangle, famous for disappearing ships and planes. But did you know that there are other such geographic locations where higher than usual frequencies of paranormal activity occur? And why should this be? Sacred triangles can be observed in many places of worship. Geometrically stacked triangles form yantras in Hinduism. Across countless theologies and belief systems, there are trinities, or three tenets which must balance to achieve righteousness and enlightenment. Some of the better-known symbolic examples include the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, spirit, mind, and body, power, courage, and wisdom. Is it possible there's something beyond the metaphoric or symbolic meaning of triangles, in which certain geographic triangular coordinates could potentially possess a power, making those areas more prone to paranormal activity? Join us in a series in which we explore such triangles. Today, The Wandering Crow discusses the Bridgewater Triangle. Enjoy.
There is a medicine story that tells of Crow's fascination with her own shadow. She kept looking at it, pecking at it until her shadow woke up and became alive. Then Crow's shadow ate her. Crow is dead Crow now. Join us as we attempt to look through the wandering crow's eye to find the gateway to the supernatural, to seek to know the unknowable mysteries of creation. Welcome to the Wandering Crow Podcast. Hi, murderers! Welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Crow. This is Mandy.
It's JT.
This is Abbey.
And this is Cameron.
Yay! We are here to talk about the Bridgewater Triangle, and that was a pretty awesome intro that Abbey did for us. First and foremost, listeners, we love you so much, and we just recently we broke 1,000 downloads, and that's very exciting, and we wouldn't be here at that goal without you guys all supporting us and listening to us. We ask that you continue to do so by listening to the entire episode if you can, and give us a rating, hopefully 4 or 5 stars would be great, and share. Make sure that you share us with your friends if you like what you're hearing, and help us spread the word of the Wandering Crow. We've got a Facebook, we've got an Instagram, we've got a website, we've got an email, and the email is wanderingcrowpodcast@gmail.com. The website is thewanderingcrow.com. And and we have a Discord, and all of that stuff can be found in the show notes. We have all of those links to all of those things. So if you feel like you want to send us a story or reach out, please feel free to do so. And now on with the show. So let's talk about the Bridgewater Triangle. The triangle itself is an area that's about 200 square miles. It is within the southeastern part of Massachusetts in the United States, and just a ton of paranormal activity is supposed to go on there. Renowned cryptozoologist named Lauren Coleman was the first person who really spent time really looking at it and designated it the Bridgewater Triangle, and that was in the 70s. The towns that make up the points of the triangle include Rehoboth, Abington, and Freetown, with Bridgewater being right in the center. There's other towns that are included in the triangle that supposedly are vortexes. I'm not going to name them. And there's been a ton of paranormal activity that Lauren Coleman himself was able to trace back all the way back to the 1760s. However, knowing what we know about the infamous Pukwudgie story and some of the native lore, the indigenous lore of the area, we know that some of that goes back even further than that. Some famous landmarks within the triangle include Freetown Fall River State Forest, Profile Rock, which in some newspaper articles is used interchangeably with the name Old Joshua's Mountain, Solitude Stone, Bridgewater State University, Taunton State Hospital, Hornbeam School, and the Hockomock Swamp. The Hockomock Swamp is actually very important. Some of the paranormal claims, which are said to happen in the Bridgewater Triangle, include UFOs, unnatural animal sightings, Thunderbird sightings, cult activity, Native American curses, and cryptids, so like Pukwudgie and Bigfoot. All of that said, we wanted to take a moment and go back and acknowledge the first people of that land, and those are the Wampanoag people. Their name literally means the people of the first light, and I have a creation story for them. So, the last great North American glacier began its retreat some 10,000 years ago, leaving behind the accumulation of boulders, sand, and clay that is now known as Martha's Vineyard. At the time, it was Noepe Island. There, it is said, a benevolent being named Moshop roamed the land. One day, Moshop was making his way across the mainland to the headlands of the Akana Cliffs. Weary from his journey, Moshop dragged his foot heavily, leaving a deep track in the mud. At first, only a silver thread of water trickled in the track, but gradually the ocean's force of wind and tides broadened and deepened the opening, creating an island known as Noepe. The Wampanoag were the first people of Noepe. The ancestors of the Wampanoag people have lived there for at least 10,000 years. Some dates go back as far as 15,000 years at Akana, which is now called Gayhead, and throughout the island of Noepe. They pursued a traditional economy that was based mostly on fishing and agriculture. They shared the belief that Moshop created Noepe and the neighboring islands and taught their people how to fish and catch whales, and that this being, Moshop, still presides over their destinies. And the Wampanoag people believe that 100 million years of history are imprinted in the colorful clay cliffs of Akana. Pre-colonial times, the Wampanoag tribe was comprised of 67 distinct tribes, and they all had the same cohesive religious belief and lived in the same general area. And they spoke similar languages, and so they had a primary leader, one chief who was known as the Sachem. So like each tribe had its own individual chief, but then there was one primary chief who kind of oversaw all of the 67 tribes together. In the 1600s, the Wampanoag people had 40,000 strong in their 67 tribes. What's important is that 40,000 people from 1615 to 1619, so in a 4-year period when Europeans were first starting to traverse the island, and they were bringing diseases primarily from the rats that were stowed away on board, there were epidemics. So one in particular, leptospirosis epidemic carried by rodents, dramatically reduced the population of the Wampanoag people and their neighboring tribes. But the Wampanoag were the most heavily impacted. And there were some neighboring tribes that got off a little bit more easily from these infections and maintained a pretty robust population following this leptospirosis epidemic. During the time when the pilgrims first landed on Plymouth Rock, that was 1620. So that was about a year after the epidemic had ended. So at that time, the Wampanoag people were facing a lot of stress and were being challenged. There were some aggressions happening from another neighboring tribe, and I cannot remember the name of this tribe, and I tried looking for it. I couldn't find it, who was a rival tribe. They were competing for resources and they were competing for land, and this rival tribe did not do as badly in that epidemic, so they had more people. So the Wampanoag people, for a very short period of time, actually had a kind of allyship. They had allied a little bit with the pilgrims, with the colonizers, the Puritans, because they had the same mutual enemy, and they were able to help each other through those issues. Where the Wampanoags helped the pilgrims kind of understand the land and the resources and how to survive, the pilgrims provided them with numbers and some protection from the rival tribes. So during this peaceful period, it was a Sachem by the name of Massasoit, and he, for about 45, almost 50 years, had a pretty decent peace between the Wampanoag people and the pilgrims. But after he died, tensions increased. The Pilgrims wanted more land. The Pilgrims wanted more control, and they were infringing on the sovereignty of the indigenous peoples. There was, in particular, Massasoit's son was called King Philip by the colonies. His name was Metacom. And during this time, 3 of his warriors were executed and killed by the Plymouth colony justice system because supposedly they had killed another indigenous person. And this was a really big deal among the tribes because this was a tribal matter. This should not have been anything for the Plymouth colony to have involved themselves in. And it helped escalate the tensions. Another person who was an advisor to Metacom ended up murdered. And there were raids on the area by the colonizers, by the Puritans. So eventually enough was enough, and then we have what's called King Philip's War, which starts in 1675. And what's important to know about that is during that war, 40% of the Wampanoag people were killed in that war, and some 3,000 colonists were also killed. Is that right, JT? I feel like you had said that.
No, it was 3,000 Wampanoag and 900 colonists that died in that war. But per capita, it's the largest war that's happened on the United States soil, like, per capita. So for the area, the amount of people that died is the most on the United States soil. Or
that is
American soil.
Astronomical.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that 3,000 was 40%. So that tells you what the epidemic did to they went from 40,000. So 40%. So they had about 8,000 people left. 3,000 died in that war. The remaining war-aged young men from the Wampanoag tribe were enslaved and shipped off to the West Indies. And in modern day times, which really kind of brought a tear to my eye is there have been a lot of preservation acts and preservation attempts for the Wampanoag culture and language. And they actually were able to trace a small group of Wampanoag people who retained some of the culture and some of the language and stories in the West Indies. So they've been able to reconnect with some of those lost people, the descendants of those lost people, so I don't want to go on for too long but it's important because all of this has gone on. And finally, they used Hobbamock Swamp, which was a very important place to the indigenous peoples. It was a place that was considered to be the land of the spirits. And actually, there's a name for it. The place where spirits dwell.
The Hockomock Swamp.
There was another name for it, too, that the colonists gave it.
The swamp is linked to Hobbamock, a deity of death and disease.
Yes, I have that information. So
They called it.
It's organized, JT, a certain way.
Okay.
Damn it, I lost it.
You said Hobbamock instead of Hockomock, so I just
They used them interchangeably sometimes because Hobbamock was said to have lived there.
Right.
So, sorry, I apologize. So, Hockomock Swamp is the last holdout place. Logistically, it was really easy to hide there. It was difficult to traverse in. The swamp is very dense and very wild, and so it was a really good base of operations for the Wampanoag people. And it is said that in his last days, after the last big decimation of his young, most powerful warriors, like his strongest group of warriors is killed, his wife and his son are finally captured by the colonists, and the colonists have him, and he is broken. He's a broken man, and it's said that he sat down at the base of Profile Rock, which is said to be the profile of Massasoit, his father, and he shed his first tear. And at the base of Profile Rock, he gave the Wampanoag wampum belt to one of his other warriors. And that belt was like a symbol of office of his chieftainship for the Wampanoag people. And it's said to have all of the history of the Wampanoag people. And it's a very sacred object. So he gave it to this other warrior. And then Anawan was his name. And King Philip, Metacom, left and was very shortly after captured by the colonists. And he was executed. And I will not, it was pretty brutal what they did to him. So all of that to say, there was a lot of death, a lot of destruction, a lot of greed, a lot of pain that was suffered at the hands of the Wampanoag people ultimately it can all be pointed back to the Puritans and the Pilgrims. And
They also called it the Devil's Swamp, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Even they had a negative connotation with that place. A place where the spirits dwell, where you couldn't go by yourself. And then the white people came and it was known as the Devil's Swamp. So everybody kind of saw it as a significant space. A sort of thinning of the veil there.
So Mandy's saying that perhaps all of this death and destruction and chaos contributes to the phenomenon in the swamp, but also there was already a history with the indigenous people that this swamp had something going
It's
on.
a kind of
Yes?
Ouroboros.
Right. And as my name implies, white guilt, I think that a lot of people who are descended from the colonists there, maybe subconsciously, probably not consciously, they probably wouldn't ever say it, but there is a belief that those lands are cursed, that the native indigenous peoples cursed that land and cursed the settlers as a result of all of the violence. And I think that subconsciously people feel like that's deserved. Like, well, obviously they would. Why wouldn't they? Because of all the shit that went down. But is that what happened? Maybe. I probably, if I was a survivor of that, probably would curse the colonists. Like, I would never wish for them to be well ever. Like, I would not have suffered all of that and been very peaceful and happy about and calm about all of that. And yes, Habamak, who is this deity, this Manitou, who is supposed to be kind of like a god of death and a god of...
It's Manitoa, right?
Oh, maybe. I could be pronouncing it wrong. That's entirely possible. Habamak is the spirit of death and a destructive sometimes. So what's tough, though, is there's been a lot of imposing of Christian ideas on this idea of Habamak, and he's associated with the devil by Christians and locals in the area. But he was a spirit of death, and he was considered to be very important to the Wampanoag people. Was he necessarily evil, or is that something that we've added to the story afterwards and said, well, this is an evil being because he's a spirit of death?
It's funny that you say that too, because I always kind of, like, in reading a little bit about him, he kind of reminds me of the Grim Reaper.
Yeah. Is he truly evil, or is he just a neutral figure who's in charge of
That's
something
just
that we
his
find
job.
really uncomfortable? Yeah, he's just a man doing his job.
I'm just doing my job. Get off my back.
But he's a very powerful kind of bogeyman kind of figure. So much so that during the time of Metacom, there is an indigenous person who is kind of on the side of the pilgrims and the colonists, who goes by the name of Habamak, and he inspires fear in the other native indigenous people. So there is something there. I just wanted to touch on all of that because a lot of what people will say in a lot of the articles that I read and the research that I did is they will say, well, indigenous legend says this, and the Wampanoag people believed that. And it said the Wampanoags thought this, and blah, 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 blah. But I could not find a whole lot of resources directly from the Wampanoags themselves to back those claims up. So it's a lot of people saying, oh, the Wampanoags believe this thing, but I didn't actually see very much in my research where the Wampanoags themselves were claiming that. We do know about the Pukwudgie. That is available and can be found. There are some Wampanoag sources that do talk a little bit about Pukwudgie, and we know about Habamak, and we know about Mashep, and we know about some of these stories, but a lot of them are not readily available and easily found. So I do feel like it should be taken with a grain of salt when there's all of these stories being told by other people who are not Wampanoag saying, well, this is what the Wampanoag say. Is that true? Or is that just something that we're doing to lend credence to the stories and create some mystique? Not to say that I don't believe stuff's going on, because I actually do think there is stuff going on there. It's just, I would tread lightly when it comes to, assigning the lore, believing the fact that this is all lore that can be traced all the way back, because we don't know that, and I don't know that the Wampanoag people are necessarily feeling very sharing, and I don't know that I don't blame them for that. I would want to keep my culture probably to myself too, if after being through everything that they've been through.
I mean, that's a lot of their cultures, like different tribes, all kind of hold that belief.
Yeah, and
There was an anthropologist that was studying them, and he kind of exposed some of the things that they told him a little too much, and they actually killed him. Like it's this was back in like what, the 50s or 60s, so like it's been pretty closely guarded for a long time. Only recently have they started to really share, and they're still pretty close-lipped.
I do feel like it also depends on the attitude of the person who's asking and what they're asking for. Like, I have a genuine desire to just know about the land. Like, I really want to know about the history of the land, and who are the only people who know that. The indigenous peoples who are here for thousands of years. Like, that's where I come from. But I think there's a lot of people, like J.K. Rowling straight up appropriated skinwalkers and turned it into something completely different than what it actually is. And like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I can understand it, I guess, is what I'm coming from. But anyway, I have some lore of Habermock. There is at least a mountain range known as the Sleeping Giant. And it is a place of reverence and mystique. It's somewhere in the area. I don't specifically know exactly where it is.
I think it's a little northwest of the triangle itself, and that area, some of the stories are lumped into the triangle area.
Okay. It's like Skinwalker Ranch in the Uintah Mountains, man. Like, it's so...
Yeah, Skinwalker Ranch is such a tiny little place, and there's other ranches all around it. It's such a large area, and there's other things that go on, and stories that just haven't been told. So, same type of thing.
Well, I'm just thinking about, like, how we have this area that's, like, the hub of the paranormal activity, and then we've got these sacred mountains, like the Uintahs, where shit happens.
Oh, true, yeah. You're right.
We also have the Sleeping Giant Mountain.
So talk about the Hockomock Swamp. You were saying something?
You know, it's funny, the Druids actually worshiped the marshes too, and they believed that it was a sacred land. So it's kind of funny that carries over a little bit. They used to do human sacrifices there, and their priests would...
In the swamp?
Yeah, they would sacrifice their own priests.
Whoa.
The elders of the village.
Where is this?
Yeah, if you worship Bald, you would be bludgeoned with a rod, and that was like England, the UK.
Oh,
that was their marsh worshippers. And then you would be left to be consumed by the swamp.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And so it wasn't really, views were weird back then.
Okay.
Because it wasn't a negative
This
thing.
whole thing is a tangent, but I want to know, what were they sacrificing it for? Usually a sacrifice is for something in return.
Well, he said bald.
Yeah.
Well, who's bald? Okay, don't go into it. We got to talk about Bridgewater.
Maybe that's another episode. We should do the swamps of the
maybe.
UK.
That would be cool. Yeah, that would be a great episode. Okay. So Hockomock Swamp is an Algonquin term meaning place where spirits dwell. It was a really good hunting ground. It was a place where there was a lot of game and place that had some logistical significance. For example, in King Philip's War, it was a great place that was used as a base of operations for the war effort. It also had the dual purpose of also being a sacred burial ground. Hockomock is occasionally also referred to as the Habermock, and Habermock referencing that deity. The Wampanoag worshipped and feared, again, this is from, I think, Wikipedia, this source, feared Habermock. He's the chief deity of death and disease. Habermock, composed of human souls of the dead, was known to congregate in areas like the Hockomock. Thus, the terms Hockomock and Habermock became interchangeable among non-natives when referring to the swamp or the spirit.
Who else read it as a hobo mock?
I just automatically thought Hockomock because I had already heard
Yeah.
the word Hockomock. So then I just interchanged the K sound for a B sound.
My son always thought he was going to be a hobo when he grew up. He wanted to be a hobo.
Oh,
The stick and the handkerchief tied to the end of the stick, he was like ready to jump on a train and go.
I mean, it's a free life.
Stick and bindle is what you're looking
There
for
you go.
there.
There
Get
you
real
go.
good at
Yeah.
a harmonica.
okay. So according to Quinnipiac tradition, Habermock was actually a giant stone spirit. He was a prominent figure in a lot of the traditional stories. And one day he became enraged about the mistreatment of his people and stamped his foot down in anger. But he's such a large and powerful spirit. When he did this, he actually diverted the course of the Connecticut River. This is where the river suddenly swings east in Middleton, Connecticut. After several hundred miles of running due south. In order to prevent him from wreaking such havoc in the future, the good spirit Caton cast a spell on Habamak to sleep forever as the prominent sleeping giant mountain. So Habamak himself, the sleeping giant mountain, is him. He is the sleeping giant. And there's also other stories. So the Pakumtuk story relates that Pakumtuk Ridge and Sugarloaf Mountain are the remains of a giant beaver, which was also killed by the spirit Habamak. So the Wangunk tribe, anytime there was seismic activity, said that that was an angry Habamak who was shaking the earth. So the sleeping giant, that mountain, is not just a geographical landmark, but also the spiritual entity Habamak. They revered the giant as a manifestation of this powerful spirit. According to Quinnipiac legend, Habamak was a formidable spirit who, feeling slighted by the lack of reverence from the people, unleashed his wrath upon the land.
Would we think that there's rare metals in there?
Maybe.
Just a little side note. This mountain we're talking about is part of the Appalachian chain.
Yeah.
Just that mountain range itself is steeped in a lot of the same mysterious, weird, crazy stuff.
The Appalachians, man, that's a treasure trove of information.
Totally. I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah. So Habamak is such an ingrained figure as part of like the sleeping giant lore that in the 1920s and 1930s, there is this group called the Sleeping Giant Park Association who actually fought legal battles to stop quarry operations on the giant's head.
That's what I was saying.
So, like literally where the giant is supposed to be. The supporters invoked the legend and said, look, if you do this, you're going to wake up this spirit. And they believed that by disturbing Habamak, disturbing his rest would cause him to wake up, and he would bring his wrath and rain misfortune down upon the local community. They ended up, I think they won that.
As an actual white man, my first thought was, there's probably rare metals inside of this god. We should mine it. And if he's asleep, well, we can maybe kill him while he's down.
Yeah, naturally, that was the first thought that came to you.
Quit creating more white guilt.
Oh my god. Okay, so that's about all I have for Habamak. There is a ghost story associated with Profile Rock. I think I don't know if anybody has the ghost story, but people say because it was the last place where King Philip was, a broken and just a beaten, spiritually broken, heartbroken man, the place where he shed his first tears, that he can actually be seen there from time to time. There's this lonely, sad figure
reaching out to the tourists that wander by.
Yes, make sure you pay the park rangers money.
He actually had a deal with the conquerors. He said that if he gave himself up right there, his people would be treated better. And then that was completely betrayed.
Obviously they did. See, that's why I'm white guilt.
And so, well, that was why his spirit is said to still haunt that place, and he's sort of pleading.
Isn't there something with the staff or whatever it is he gave away?
The belt.
The wampum belt. That's also
the wampum belt.
And important. The reason why it has history on it is because they used to do a practice where they braided things in a particular way. A specific knot would mean that there was a battle in this century, or a different knot, there was a drought here, and so on. So it literally had the history.
It's a historical tapestry. It's extremely important to the people. And until it can be restored to them, that piece of them is missing. And some people have said that that's part of the Native American curse, is that King Philip can't rest in peace, that the people will never reach their full potential and will have this shroud of negativity over them until they can find it, and it's just gone. I mean, the claim is that it just disappeared.
They're people of amnesia now.
Yeah,
their entire history,
Yeah.
whatever they had built up.
Go ahead. A people with amnesia. That's a really great way to say it.
Yeah, people of amnesia. They everything they had built up, everything they had done prior to, is been reduced to how we found them, not what they went
not
through.
who they were for thousands of years before. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm really glad that we got to spend some time, giving them time and discuss what happened to them. It makes me feel a little bit better because it is very, and I think that we'll talk about this, but Bridgewater feels very touristy.
JT, I want to hear your
Yeah,
part.
so before we go away from Wampanoag, there's some folklore that comes out of the Wampanoag. We've heard Pukwudgie before, and I don't know if you've ever heard the term or heard of the Pukwudgie. It's sometimes spelled Pukwudgie or Pukwudgini,
Oh.
spelled Puckwudjinee, almost like genie, Pukwudgini. So different spellings.
Another gin.
The gin, yes.
I just want to throw it out there. I did a throwaway retelling of the Pukwudgie story in a previous episode. I don't remember how it came up. I don't know if we were doing a cryptid episode or what, but I did tell very briefly.
I think the Little People episode.
Maybe that was it. That was
Yeah,
probably
I think so,
it.
actually.
Yep.
The Pukwudgie emerges from the oral traditions of the Wampanoag people. The name itself translates as little wild man of the woods that vanishes, hinting at its elusive nature, described as standing 2 or 3 feet tall with smooth gray skin, oversized ears, nose and fingers, and sometimes a potbelly or porcupine-like quills, or others have described it as being hairy. It resembles like a troll or goblin in appearance, but other descriptions that I've heard of or researched kind of also makes it look like maybe some sort of cat standing on its hind legs.
Oh.
So in early Wampanoag stories, Pukwudgies weren't always malevolent. They were tricksters, but they were helpful to humans. There was a symbiotic relationship. They would assist each other with small tasks, sharing knowledge of the forest. This ambivalence, it reflected a broader indigenous understanding of nature as both the benevolent and unpredictable. They were said to possess supernatural abilities, appearing and disappearing at will, shape-shifting often into porcupine-like creature or half-humanoid hybrid, wielding poison arrows, conjuring fire, and even luring people to their death, particularly off cliffs. These powers made them formidable, but their relationship with humans was initially one of a cautious coexistence. So the key myth that ties them to the Wampanoag is there's a myth that ties them to Mawashop, a giant cultural hero in Wampanoag lore, and his wife, Granny Squannet. And according to legend, Pukwudgies once admired Mawashop, who was beloved by the Wampanoag for his strength and his kindness, but the Pukwudgie got jealous of the people worshiping this guy and not paying attention to them. This is when they kind of turned against the human and started becoming more of the pranksters, more of the
Maleficent.
Yeah. Eventually, because of these pranks and the outright malice, Mawashop eventually banished them, scattering them across North America, which I found interesting because there are tales of little people across Native American lore. And remember, this is all just what we've been able to get out of these people from their own stories. So
And that comes all the way out here. I was talking about how they said there were trolls in their pathway in our desert here.
Yeah.
But I wonder what they did, because there would have been some sort of treaty, some sort of agreement made, and that would have had to have been betrayed before they outright become hostile to everyone they meet.
well,
Some sort of betrayal in a big way.
that can be kind of explained a little bit. There was some revenge by the Pukwudgie against Mawashop. They got revenge by killing his 5 sons. And this falling out marks kind of a pivot in their story, transforming them from the quirky forest spirits to the harbingers of mischief and doom. So their connection to the Bridgewater Triangle goes to the Wampanoag, to Hockomock Swamp, to the Freetown Fall River State Forest, which is, southeast of Hockomock Swamp in part of Freetown. So it's likely that the Pukwudgie were originated as cautionary tales warning against the dangers of the wild or the consequences of disrespecting the natural order. So that could be where this comes from. But then when, of course, the English colonists arrived and there was the war by King Philip, there was also because of the brutality of Metacon's death, it says that because of that dark energy, the Pukwudgies absorbed all that dark energy from that specific event. And that's what made them more malevolent. That's what made them more even darker.
Just sounds like he wasn't a very good guy, and it bled over.
Metacom was a good guy.
Metacom was a good guy, though, but because of how he was
But what happened
brutally
to him?
killed,
Yeah.
that dark energy from that murder was absorbed by the Pukwudgie.
Oh, okay, because he was so good and
Right.
what happened to him was so
Yeah.
bad.
Right.
Okay.
So
all right.
who is saying that, though? Do the Wampanoag people say that? Where does that come from?
That comes from several different sources that have just kind of stitched together. I've got
Interesting.
about 20 different sources that came together to create what I wrote here. And it's all just myth. Yeah. There's really not a lot of documented stories of them other than in recent times, like in the 1970s, when there's all of a sudden a lot of stories of all of this paranormal stuff coming out of that area. But there is one story that I would like to highlight, and this is the most recent story from a person that lived in one of the towns, a guy named Bill Russo, and he was a former Raynham resident. And so this is the late 1990s. So this is the most recent story that we have of these sightings. He was walking his dog in this town. They have this one spot called the High Tees, and it's where the power lines go. They call those power line poles the High Tees. And it's not a normal place that he would walk, but he worked late and he would get off at midnight, and then he would walk his dog every night around midnight. So this time he went a different way. And he was walking along and he came to a spot along the road where there was a single street light. And that street light was casting a round light onto the street. And all of a sudden he was feeling this tug on the dog's leash. And he looked down at his dog, and his dog was afraid. His dog was scared of something. And then he looks up into the light and he sees this little creature walking out. This little upright 2 to 3 foot creature with a beard. No, I'm kidding.
Great big burly beard.
Nice timing. Love that. My husband just walked into frame, and he's a very beardy man.
That's why I said beard.
That was funny. Good job, Reggie.
So he called it a small pot-bellied creature, hairy all over the place, and it had a raspy voice, and it was talking to him, and it was saying, Iwan Chu, Kier, Kier. Iwan Chu, Kier, Kier. And he was kind of looking at this creature and really couldn't understand what it was, but it was like a little person. But it looked old. It looked, it wasn't young. It was a little older looking. And it kept saying, Iwan Chu, Kier, Kier. And it kept getting more insistent, and it actually would beckon to him to come here. So it creeped him out, and he just turned around with his dog and left. And finally, when he got back, he was sitting thinking about it. He was like, what was that thing saying to me? He goes, he thinks it was speaking English, saying, we want you. Come here. Come here.
I just got chills.
I know. It's the most creepy story, man.
He didn't tell this story for about 20 years because he thought people would think he's crazy. As he got a little older, he finally talked about it. There's other stories of people seeing little people. There's a lake in the area with an island where they would see these creatures around a fire, and then they would all of a sudden turn into little light orbs and then fly away. And so that's part of the mystery of the Pukwudgie, the shape-shifting ability. They can turn into light balls. And people have seen light balls in the area along railroad tracks, along different things. The other thing, too, that they're known to do is to lure people. There's a famous ledge in Freetown, a cliff. That it is a known place that Pukwudgie lead people to their death, where people have fallen off that cliff and died.
Freetown is also a pretty good hotspot for ghost activity. That's so I heard the Iwan Chu Kier story.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the Pukwudgie. I mean, that goes back to the Wampanoag stories, like that story. And it's very possible, too, that the malevolence of the Pukwudgie story comes from the colonists bringing in Christianity and making them evil, not making them the trickster spirits that they are. Because even
That's
if
come
you're
up
a trickster
before in
spirit,
stories about like the women in the woods and other entities who maybe were not bad, but it was their rejection and criminalization from new townspeople that kind of drove them to becoming bad.
Well, there's also like a
So.
superimposition of Christian values over pagan and animistic beliefs. It happened even in
Mhm.
It doesn't fit into our religion, so therefore
Okay, so
evil
you're talking
doesn't.
about
Yeah.
the storytelling manipulating the way that these things are viewed.
Yes.
And maybe not even necessarily that they do become more malevolent.
They were just painted as
Okay.
malevolent because of the nature of them being tricksters, and because they're not of God, they must be of the devil.
They're obviously demons if they're not God's creatures. Yeah. There's a lot of that. And I feel like there's a lot of that even in the stories that we've investigated here on this show. Like things that were like Lady in White, a lot of them, like La Llorona is not one of them, but some of them, quite a few of them, maybe were deities that had pagan worshippers, but when the Christians came in, they were set aside and demonized and were made to be evil when maybe they weren't truly evil.
I'm picking
at
up
all.
what you're putting down.
The connection I think I made with this story specifically, and this is just me thinking, the area is also steeped in Bigfoot history. There's Bigfoot societies down there that are constantly searching for Bigfoot, and all across the Appalachian Mountains is huge Bigfoot area. I mean, we could talk for days about Bigfoot sightings, but if you think about the way the guy described this little person, even though it was looking kind of old or anything like that, I mean, I was thinking, well, what if this is just a child of a Bigfoot?
Bigfoot baby.
That's crazy.
Sasquatch is my daddy and he's going to protect me.
He did say too that it wasn't maleficent. It didn't seem to have any sort of negative intent. It just
No, it didn't have. Well, being that it's a trickster, it was just trying to get him to follow him.
Right. It was luring
it
him.
could have been leading him off a cliff. Yeah.
Could have been leading him off a cliff, you know.
Hey, can you come help me find my puppy?
Yeah.
Come to my
Hey, free
van full of candy.
So you know that type of thing. I mean, we don't hear stories of people being killed by Bigfoot because, you know, if you're killed by Bigfoot, no one's going to know.
Dang. Cameron, I just owe you a huge apology. Every time you say maleficent, I keep thinking to myself, God, that's not even a real word. What is he saying?
Maleficent.
I just thought you were saying malevolent wrong. And I looked it up. It's a real word all by itself, maleficent. It means causing harm or destruction, especially by supernatural means. So I apologize.
Did you not?
I was
see
very wrong.
The Disney movie.
Yeah, there's a whole movie named it.
I didn't. And also, it's Disney. They make shit up. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, malevolent doesn't necessarily involve paranormal. Maleficent.
My
does.
apologies, Cameron.
I didn't know it was specific to supernatural. That's very cool.
No,
Way to
it's
go,
just
Cameron.
evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just evil,
All right
yeah.
then.
Okay.
Okay. I retract my internal judgment of you.
So we were speaking of the Habermock and how he's the mountain. The most recent Bigfoot sighting in the area is from in that mountain area. Let's see. Okay, so a 25-year career Army officer reported multiple potential Bigfoot encounters over 3 days while hiking at Wachusett Mountain in Worcester County, which is about the same area of this mountain we were talking about. That's the most recent documented story we have of Bigfoot in the area. Previous to that, on July 14, 2009, a young couple driving through Freetown reported seeing a large brown hair-covered man rise from a crouched position along a 2-lane highway. And the couple was so disturbed that they called 911, prompting a search, but nothing was ever found. And there's so much more.
Those are the most recent stories, though.
Those are those two most recent stories in that area of Bigfoot sightings. other than, there's lots of footprints, documented footprints. There's a whole museum for
But are those
Bigfoot.
recent or current?
I think most of those come from the 1970s.
Yeah.
So in 1970, there was a sighting of a 7-foot hairy creature near Hockomock Swamp, which prompted a police search for a supposed bear. And then in 1978, another gentleman observed a similar figure entering the swamp. So those are some of the older stories. So most of the stories of Bigfoot are a little bit older, and there's so many of them, I just didn't have time to dive into all of those. Another cryptid that was interesting is rumored to be a thunderbird. And I'm just going to highlight that back in 1988, there was 2 boys who were following 3-toed footprints into the Hockomock Swamp, and they stumbled upon a massive bird-like creature, far larger than any known local species, such as a great blue heron, which stands about the creature stood about 4.5 feet tall with a 6-foot wingspan, and the boys claimed that it had a humanoid quality, saying it was the size of a tall man and wings, and it propelled it straight up into the air when it spotted them.
Is that what a thunderbird is? A humanoid giant bird?
No, shouldn't be, but
No, okay. The thunderbird is just what somebody called this.
There's giant bird-like stories. Like there's these giant birds that are seen, and they're bigger than. Okay, so I said that wrong. The great blue heron, which can stand about 4.5 feet tall with a 6-foot wingspan. These birds were much larger than that. So these boys were saying it was, the size of a 6-foot or taller man, and an even larger wingspan than that. So
Did you say how old they are, the boys?
I think they were like 8 to 10.
Perspective is a real biatch when you're 8 and 10 years old.
True.
Mandy, you're muted, I think.
I was just saying, I was agreeing with you. Everybody looks 6 feet tall when you're 8.
Okay.
well, if they're saying it's about the size of a full-grown man, that is something.
That's true. No.
Yeah. I'll give them that.
So another notable sighting was in 1971, and this was from the Norton Police Sergeant Thomas Downey. He reported encountering a 6-foot tall bird with a wingspan nearly double that, around 10 to 12 feet. And he was driving near Bird Hill in Easton. And that's a town within the Triangle. And he described the creature lifting off from the roadside, soaring over his vehicle and disappearing into the night. And he filed an official report about it. But there's not many other sightings other than that. And then other things, which could be a real thing, is there's been rumors of snakes in the swamp. Big, large snakes. There is that potential. And then when the colonists moved in, they could have eradicated them because they were a threat.
They could still be there.
They could still be there.
Like the Everglades are being overtaken by invasive species of boas right now.
Uh-huh. There's people that go out and hunt them. I've seen
Fishing
that.
Garrett, he's the best.
And people who have pets, it's really common. So moats around zoos, the Phoenix Zoo, that moat has to be drained periodically because people get sick of owning a turtle and think, oh, this is perfect. And they put their turtle out in the zoo moat and leave it there to fend for itself. And every once in a while, they have to drain the entire moat to figure out what the hell they have in there. And they found some wild species of turtles in there before.
There's so many species of turtles in there.
It's just a thing. So I guess that being said, my opinion of there being crazy snake sightings is that it's not that weird.
It's a swamp.
Right.
Yeah.
Green check for Abbey. Giant snakes. Yes, possible.
To that same point, they have to drain a swamp that's in a controlled environment to find out what species of turtle they have. How easy would it be for a wild species to remain hidden in the wild, where you can't drain the moat?
Right. And the swamp is what, 16,000 acres or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big ol' area.
Well, and I've actually physically been diving in that
You
moat
have?
of the Phoenix Zoo. Yes.
Oh, the zoo.
The Phoenix Zoo.
I thought you were about to say the Huckabuck Swamp.
What stories do
What?
you have?
You've been
Hold
holding
it down on
out!
us.
The silt in that lake, or whatever you want to call it, the pond, is so deep. It's 3 or 4 feet deep.
Around the
Just
zoo?
the silt itself around the zoo.
Oh.
And so you've got, a couple feet of water, and then you run into silt. I know this because I dropped a wrench
That
into the
sucks.
silt and had to reach down. and
JT
find
was
it.
a lake maintenance guy, so he used to have to do dives and stuff to like.
I was curious.
Yeah,
What the hell are you doing with a wrench in the zoo?
that was a smelly job. Stunk so bad.
I want to go back to. I feel like we didn't give you quite the reaction that you deserved to the baby Bigfoot theory. That's
Okay.
crazy.
And I think it's
just a
plausible.
theory. I mean,
I think it's plausible too. That's a really interesting idea. You can't prove it.
Apes have a rougher face than people,
Mhm.
so it would be easy to say, in the dark, this man might have thought that it looked like an older person, when really it was just a baby Bigfoot.
mhm.
Yeah. And then
And they have a particular sound in their vocals, as we've heard in that audio clip that Mandy shared a couple episodes
Mhm.
yeah,
ago.
the Sierra sounds.
The Mongolian ape, whatever it is.
I was just going to bring up the Thunderbird thing. I don't know any stories directly from the Wampanoag people, but the Thunderbirds, in my group, we also call them Thunder Beings, are very important spiritual entities that have the power of the rains and the wind, and they're a big deal.
They're another legendary bird.
They're a legendary
like the phoenix
creature. Yeah, well, yes, but also that is at least one particular instance of a thing that does trace back to lore that goes back a very long time. And I just happen to know that because of my lineage and my teacher and where he gets a lot of his teachings from. So the thunder
kind of traces back to Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, in South America, the thunderbird they're found everywhere. They're in a lot of North American lore. I don't know about outside of North America, but there's a lot of different indigenous peoples in this area, in this part of the world, where the thunderbird or the thunder beings have a strong presence. So that's really cool that there's modern sightings of these things that potentially can be traced back a very long
Well,
time.
those 2 young boys describing it as a kind of a humanoid bird is important in that story, especially with what you're saying with the Thunderbird people, the stories that come from them, or I want to say lore, but that's not necessarily the right word, but the history.
The legends.
The legends.
Teachings, yeah.
Thank you. The legends.
Legends and mythos.
Other cryptids in the area include the Mansfield Mystery Cat. But there's not a whole lot about it, and there's not a whole lot of sightings. Well, there's been sightings of a big black cat. It's kind of like a puma-sized cat in the area, where we know that the area has bobcats, but bobcats are not as big as a leopard or a puma or even a mountain lion. There's also an interesting story. It's an infamous incident from 1976. It's the Black Dog of Abington event. There's a 12-year-old, Carol Kane, was awakened, or he awoke her firefighter father, Philip Kane, after discovering a horrifying scene in their backyard. Their 2 ponies, Jojo and Peekaboo Boy, lay dead with their throats ripped out. Feeding on one of the carcasses was an enormous dog described as a hulking black and brown beast, possibly a German Shepherd Doberman mix, appearing as large as the ponies themselves, which likely weighed 300 to 500 pounds each. Philip, half-dressed and armed with a baseball bat, chased the dog off, but it returned, and he fired a pistol shot that missed, and the animal fled into the nearby swamp. And then the next day, there was a whole search to track this dog. There was Frank Curran, who tracked it to the Summer Street Railroad tracks, where he fired another shot that also missed. And then the dog vanished, leaving a legacy of fear, but never seeing anything, never finding anything about it or ever seeing it ever again. And there's no other stories that go along with this one. So this is just one story about big dogs in the area too. There's really no other explanations and no other current, more recent sightings of these big cats or these big dogs in the area.
Another wild parallel to Skinwalker Ranch.
Mm-hmm. No
Yes.
kidding. Good call, Abby.
Yes. Another wild parallel to this area could be capitalizing on stories for tourism. And that's all I'll say about that.
Speaking of Puckwudgies turning into little orbs, my responsibility for this episode was looking into UFO sightings because this area claims an abundance of UFO sightings. It's really hard to find a lot of really specific stories or cases of UFO sightings, as far as I can tell. And maybe I didn't do a great search, but what happened is there were a couple of stories that really just drown out all others. And doing a search, I did search pretty hard. It's just the same stories that come up over and over and over again. And it was really difficult to break past those stories. And so I'll start with chronological order. 1908, there were actually two different stories that I was made aware of. One of them being a headline, quote, "Mysterious balloon over Bridgewater," unquote. The story goes that some undertakers in Bridgewater were out doing their job, and about 4 a.m, they observed a very large orb of light in the sky. Within that light, though, they believed that they saw the shape of a hot air balloon. Now, that story was used in the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, and it also circulates around the internet in a large number of blogs that talk about the Bridgewater Triangle. So that one is one that they really hold near and dear as a big claim. Another story I heard of in 1908 was allegedly Halloween night, October 31st, 1908. There was a number of people who witnessed large light orbs in the sky. In spring 1979, now this is the one that gets all the attention and really overshadows anything else. Spring 1979, March 23rd to be exact, Jerry Lopes and Steve Spraccia, two of the more prominent players in this sighting, spot a huge... Steve Spraccia says it was probably the width of 5 747 Boeing airplanes wing to wing, and it was shaped like a baseball diamond flying in the air. Now, the real interesting twist on this story is that these two gentlemen are actually local news reporters. That is to say that these two people had solid reputations of being credible and trustworthy sources of information.
Okay.
Allegedly, they actually refrained from sharing their story at all, except apparently there was a outpouring of reports from other people all over the Bridgewater Triangle area, including a little bit outside of it. So Raynham, Bridgewater, you name it, Freetown, Abington. There was hundreds of people who were calling in to police and news sources to report that they saw something. And these two guys thought, okay, well, we should probably tell them what we saw then and share our story. And so they're kind of the the face of the story now for that particular incident. And I think that's really interesting. There's something to be said about that.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise,
it sounds very similar, this story, because I did read it. It's very similar to the Phoenix Lights story. The shape of the craft, the widespread reports of the lights. I find a lot of parallels in those stories.
It's always interesting when you can find stories that are congruent with each other. But the other thing that I thought set this story apart from others is that at the time, 1948, 1947, was when that term flying saucer caught wind and became the term that everybody used. But you've got this specific sighting where they are reporting something that looks very different from that. I thought that was really interesting. They even
A triangle.
Well, yeah.
Shape.
So not
I mean,
not quite a diamond, not quite a square, right? Like a baseball
Right.
diamond.
yeah.
So at first, I found it very compelling. I dug a little bit deeper, though, into all of these stories, obviously. I found that in the late 1800s, early 1900s, actually, the aeronautics industry, while we were already starting the development of airplanes, balloons were a big deal. NewEnglandAviationHistory.com has quite the extensive chronicling of old newspaper clips and just storylines of people taking off, descending, and all the goings on, because apparently that was a real hot industry back then. In Massachusetts specifically, there were two towns more on the west of Massachusetts. So you had Pittsfield and you had Springfield. Pittsfield had a brand new Pittsfield Aeronautics Club that had formed, and Springfield actually had an aeronautics named after Boston, so the Boston Aero Club. And they had a sort of unofficial rivalry going on, an unofficial official rivalry going on to have the most media attention and the most wind in their sails about their ballooning across the state for tourism boasting. I actually found specific stories of some gentlemen, William Van Sleet and Charles Glidden, were two people, competitors of these two clubs. William Van Sleet, actually, as a matter of fact, did fly September 10th, 1908. He actually ascended, is what they called it, from Pittsfield at midnight, traveled more than 100 miles, landing safely in Kingston, Massachusetts. And when I looked up where that is, it's not very far at all from the Bridgewater Triangle, and he easily could have been on a trajectory over the Bridgewater Triangle, Bridgewater specifically, to get to Kingsley. And anybody spotting him from the ground may think, wow, that's a weird ball of light in the sky. And obviously looking into it is going to be like, well, oddly enough, it was shaped like a hot air balloon. So I don't feel like there's a lot to those stories in the early 1900s. I think that a lot of people, I think even now, one hand doesn't know what the other's doing in a lot of cases when it comes to what's going on in the sky, everybody, which leads me to the 1979 story. There was a lot of research and development going on within the military on stealth bombers. Lots of contracts going on with Lockheed and the Northrop Aviation Company. In researching this, I found some sketches of some of the prototype designs by, insert his name here, Northrop, one of the up-and-coming designers at the time, who, by the way, was obsessed with German development. In 1939, the Germans were actually already creating spacecraft with jet propulsion. No, excuse me, I mean aircraft. And they already looked like spaceships. And so a lot of this guy's designs look like that, but he had one specifically that did look a lot like a baseball diamond. Most of his planes didn't make it anywhere. But anyway, my point being that it just feels fishy to me. It feels it's giving military testing, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's a spaceship." Could have not been. And so my little title says Bridgewater is not special, and that's because I think, at least in terms of UFO sightings, Massachusetts in general has a lot of UFO sightings, and so I don't think Bridgewater stands out in any way. In fact, in 1636 or 1639, John Winthrop, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, did I say that right?
I think so.
He was the governor of Boston, let's say, at the time. He made a habit of recording the goings-on of society at the time. He received word from some sober and reputably credible individuals who were out fishing on the water and saw orbs of light flitting around in the sky and behaving erratically. And let's just face it, in the 1600s, there were no spacecraft or anything that could do that. And so he recorded that. That's actually, arguably, I did find a lot of sources that try to say this is the first ever UFO sighting in America. This one does sound like it might be the one, but I don't know.
And that could have just been the Pukwudgie.
I wanted to talk to you about that. There's a lot of orb sightings that, if we're going to go ahead and say not every UFO sighting happening is spacecraft in the sky, it does sound like some of them move more animately, like living things. And so I'm willing to buy in. I don't know if I buy into it, but I see, that maybe some of these could be cryptids with bioluminescence. Whether they're Pukwudgie or not, maybe they are. That's kind of fun. But it's possible that they are indeed cryptids that are just so elusive, evasive, that it's hard to study them and figure out what the hell they are. That wraps up my part.
Bioluminescence, or, who knows if back in the day there was large fireflies. They were just big.
I thought of that too, but what do you mean, who knows? I guess.
And that's what that could have been.
I mean, that's not that long ago. There would be examples of, like, people collected bugs a lot back then. I feel like if there were giant fireflies around, somebody would have collected one of them bitches and stuck it in a shadow board somewhere.
You're probably right.
But that's the problem. Whatever these were, they were up high. They moved fast. The way that I read that people describe them reminds me of fly behavior. So just as you guys do, I do a lot of gardening, and there's fertilizer, and there's lots of flies that are attracted to it. And when you see flies like flirting with each other or fighting each other or whatever they're doing, they do that like weird. Sometimes they can just hover in the air and be like flitting and bouncing off of each other, literally, and then all of a sudden just be like, pew, and leave. And a lot of these orb sightings strike me as that sort of weird bug, fly, insect behavior. So fireflies, maybe. I don't know. It's not that far-fetched from me suggesting it's some sort of cryptid, and basically that's kind of what you're saying. It could be like a weird firefly cryptid.
Firefly on a foggy night.
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
Yeah.
A glow kind of orbs.
A misty night.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe in sky whales. 100% believe in sky whales, and that there is some kind of organism that exists in the sky that is either camouflaged or is somehow near invisible in the sky. And there are stories of creatures that descend down into the lower atmosphere, and who's to say that there's not some bioluminescence or the other thought that I had was, and again, this comes back to Skinwalker Ranch. There is an episode of Skinwalker Ranch fairly recently where there had been a lot of activity on the ranch, and electrical things had died, and then that evening there's a great big orb wandering through the original homestead. And they kept saying, it's a UFO, it's a UFO, oh my God, we caught a UFO. But to me, it looked like a metaphysical spiritual orb that we see in ghost hunter videos. So who's to say it's not something that's non-physical, like spiritual entity floating around up there that was visible for all to see? I mean, there's just so much that we don't
Who's to say, right?
know.
Most of these people are being dismissed as like crackpots anyway. So, I mean,
Yeah.
why not? Well, yeah, it could be. Could be figments of their imagination, could be something real. Either way, it seems like they're not easy to spot, record, document, or study.
No. None of these things are.
No.
Right. And that's the problem.
One thing I'd like to say about this area, a lot of these stories, whether it be cryptid, UFO, ghost stories, a lot of the times people recounting the stories are always saying, well, it's my boyfriend's brother's wife's dad that saw this UFO or this thing. It's always like a chain of somebody that is recounting these stories from this area.
Never a direct
I found
witness. Yeah.
Never a direct witness, other than a few stories. The Pukwudgie story that I told is one of the few direct witness stories that I've found.
I experienced that as well. When I said maybe I didn't really look that hard, I guess one place I didn't really look much was social media, but there was, in all of my changes of keywords, trying to find something new other than just the reposting of the same story over and over again, I did find one Facebook post where somebody asked, so did anybody else witness this 1979 space event other than these two reporters? There was a lot of response to that post, and it was the same thing. To cut to the chase, it was, oh yeah, my parents saw it. My aunt over in Raynham saw it. Oh, these two kids in high school saw it. One of them got ripped to pieces for being a weirdo, so the other one kept it to herself but told me in private, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of, yes, I do know people who saw it, but not any, but also the age.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about adult witnesses in the 70s,
right?
But if they're like 30 or 40 at the time, and that was, I always keep thinking that was only 30 years ago, but that was 50 damn years ago. A lot of these, they're dead. They've got Alzheimer's, dementia. They're in group homes. They're not in a place where they can get on social media and retell from their own perspective.
Right.
It
would be their children or it would be a
relation,
cousin's nephew. And
Well, so I mean, I do have a couple of witness stories. Cool. So that they're all the red-headed phantom of Route 44. This one is Joseph Wolfe. He was driving alone on a lonely stretch on Route 44 in the rural Seekonk, Massachusetts. He experienced a startling occurrence in the winter of 1969. It was about 11:30, and he proceeded along the dark highway, and he suddenly witnessed a bizarre apparition. Quote, I saw a man's face outside the car pressed against the passenger window. This was impossible. My car was traveling nearly 50 miles an hour. The face was looking at me, grinning. I could see the man with red hair and was wearing a red plaid shirt. I swerved off the highway and brought my car to a stop. By that time, the man had vanished. After about 10 minutes, I finally calmed down enough to restart my car and drive home. The incident has left me shaken up for the past 25 years. Joe is only one of several residents that reportedly experienced strange nighttime occurrences, it says here. The next one, it says, Fred Dupree. He was also in Seekonk, Massachusetts. 1973, he was traveling down Route 44 in a pickup truck. He said, I saw a man hitchhiking on the highway. He was about 40 and he had thick red hair. He was wearing blue jeans and a red plaid shirt. He looked normal enough, so I stopped to give him a lift. It was fairly late, about 10 p.m., and I thought maybe his car had broken down somewhere. So he pulled over on the side of the highway about 30 feet in front of the hitchhiker. In his rearview mirror, he could see the red-headed man hurrying towards his pickup. He reached my truck and climbed in. I pulled back onto the highway and began to drive, and I asked the man where he was going. He looked at me sort of blankly for a minute, and he started smiling. He didn't say anything, so I just asked him again where he was going, and he just kept smiling at me. He was starting to make me feel a little uneasy, and I pulled the truck to the side of the road and told him to get out. But he did get out, but not the way I was expecting. He didn't open the door and climb out of the truck. Instead, he just vanished, right in front of my eyes. He started to get very hazy until I could begin to see through him, and then he just disappeared. It took me a long time to accept what I saw that night.
Yeah, it would.
Creepy.
Maybe his parents ended up never meeting in the 80s.
Does it make it scarier that he's redheaded? Like, kind of a little bit for me, it does.
Yes, it does. Why is that? What is it about redheaded people that make them scary as ghosts?
I don't know! Because...
What? Because he's soulless?
I mean... Ode to South Park, yes. You know, they are gingers. They don't have souls.
I love redheads.
I'm just kidding, Ginger. Ginger listeners, we love you. But also, it's such a weird detail because most I feel like I have never heard of any other redheaded ghost ever.
Mhm.
Like they are all pale with dark hair, and they are all
Yeah, all raven.
they're
hair.
all brunettes. They're all brunettes. I've never even heard of a blonde. I don't think ghost. So it's really such an interesting detail that this one is a redhead.
Here was a couple
What an
though.
interesting thing that sets this ghost
If you
apart.
think of a typical description of a lumberjack, are they not redheaded?
Nah,
Yeah.
brunette.
Auburn,
I
yeah.
don't know. Yeah, auburn.
Big red beard?
Big bushy
I mean-
beard.
It's Poe Bunyan.
Paul Bunyan type?
Was he redheaded?
No, I think he had brown hair.
Yeah, I didn't know if Paul, but I always assume brown hair, honestly.
When I think of lumberjacks, I think of like a redheaded guy with a red and black flannel, and he's got his big axe, and
I always think of Monty Python when I think lumberjack.
well,
Yeah, the red flannel for sure. The red
Yeah.
plaid, red flannel.
That's the immediate imagery. Does it
What?
say that in the story?
Red plaid.
blue jeans.
yeah,
Does it does say
Yeah.
red plaid? Okay.
That's part of his description.
ADHD. I don't.
very,
Sometimes
very
the
much
details
lumberjack to me, but
Anyway, I just wanted to talk about the redheadedness because I can't think of a single other story where the ghost is a redhead. Anyway, continue.
Well, here's the last one. Harry and Sheena Hansen. They were Swansea residents, and their station wagon actually broke down on the side of Route 44, close to Seacock. So it happened right around 10 p.m., and he told Sheena to stay in the car. He began to walk up the highway, hoping to find a house with light on where they could call AAA. He said, I had walked a fairly good distance when suddenly I saw a man sitting on the side of the road. He was a sloppy-looking guy with messy red hair. He had on a red shirt, and it wasn't tucked in. He looked maybe 50 or so, and I thought it sort of strange that he was just sitting there.
So sloppy having his shirt untucked.
What a hooligan.
What a sloppy little bastard.
Get a job.
Just sitting there at that time of night. But I approached him and asked him if he knew where I could find a phone. Suddenly the man's face got very strange. Harry remembers he stopped grinning and he twisted his mouth, and I noticed there was something wrong with his eyes. They were all clouded over, no pupils or anything, just blank, all white. I began to feel weird and started to walk away from him. As I hurried away, I heard the man laughing. I turned around, but he was no longer there. I mean, I couldn't see him, but I could still hear him laughing, as though it was just coming from a few feet away from me. And the laughing kept switching locations. At first I heard it in front of me, then I heard it from behind, then to the left. It was bizarre. I began to run along the highway back towards the car, and as I did, the laughing followed me for a good 200 or 300 feet. It scared the expletive out of me. And then it suddenly stopped. When Harry finally reached his car, he noticed that Sheena was upset as he was. She was crying, and she said that something very strange happened while he was gone. While she had been waiting for me, she turned on the car radio, and she said that a strange voice cut into the song. At first, she thought it was the DJ, but then the voice began to address her personally by name. Over the car speakers, the voice began to taunt her and laughing strangely, so she jumped out of the car, but she was too afraid to go anywhere. The couple eventually flagged down another car that was driving and were driven to a payphone, and they called AAA. To this day, we still can't explain what happened. Sheena is a much more nervous person since that incident, and actually so am I. I don't know who that man was on the highway, but there's something very, very unnatural about him. Something that I'm not sure I even want to understand.
That's good storytelling.
that's a good story.
Does anybody
That was
get
really
any
good.
creepypasta vibes from it, though?
Kind of.
I do. Are there any other
Yeah.
stories that you're aware of the redhead hitchhiker where his eyes cloud over and he like does all that extra stuff? I thought his whole
No.
thing was just that he was there and then he disappeared, which
Well,
it was
him
simpler,
laughing,
subtler.
the laughing is notable in a few of the other stories.
Oh,
And the
And
grin.
the grinning.
okay.
Yeah.
But coming over the radio, that's exclusive to this story.
Yeah.
And then the eyes changing to a foggy white, that's exclusive to this story.
I wonder if the person doesn't say it in the story. Like, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not sure I believe it, but let's just, for argument's sake, say that it is true. I wonder if he was outwardly judgmental of this sloppy homeless man. You know, like, I wonder if he said some shit. Hey, get a job. You know, like,
What's going on,
he
hippie?
sees this guy. He's definitely got judgments about the fact that he's slovenly and his shirt's not tucked in. And the storyteller's got some definite ideas about how a
Yeah.
man's supposed to look. Like, I wonder if he said
He's
something
passing
and
judgment,
antagonized,
for sure.
yeah, this spirit.
Making fun of his beard. Maybe just the fact that he had a beard and his shirt was untucked made him sloppy.
Well, nobody else says that he has a beard. Just that he has
Oh.
red hair and a
Oh.
plaid shirt.
Oh,
Okay,
I guess
we
I
inserted
imagined that
that.
because of the plaid. I just imagined he also had a beard.
I've heard he has a beard. I read some stories.
I watched the documentary,
Oh.
and then their reenactment. They
Well,
gave
yeah,
him a
no,
beard.
in this one they didn't say he was had a beard either.
But-
Harry and
Oh,
Sheena,
okay.
in
Yeah.
this story, it didn't say
No,
that.
no beard.
Just that he had messy red hair.
Well, I also heard there's people that actually drive that route at night with an open seat just to see if he'll appear in their seat.
Anybody had any luck?
Again, it's the stories of, oh yeah, my buddy's dad's brother was driving
Yeah.
down there, and there was just three of them, and then all of a sudden this thing appeared in the car while they were driving, and he was a redheaded dude.
It's an interesting ghost. I
But-
wonder if we could figure out, is there a person who died? Does this originate with an actual person who did live, who died around the highway? I wonder if that could be found. When did these stories start, Cameron? In the 70s? When did this guy first start appearing?
Earliest one here was 67.
67.
69, sorry.
I found an origin story, just as a teaser for a future episode coming up. I found an origin story for the Ashbrook Wash haunting that Cameron and I discussed in the original Arizona haunting. So I'm very excited to discuss that more
Very
when
cool.
we get to that episode. Anyway, sorry. Do you have any other stories, Cameron? Entertain me.
I keep hearing references to zombies, and it's been driving me nuts.
References, but no
I
stories.
I found that again, somebody else referenced the same line that I did, but there's no stories about zombies. So I don't know where the hell that came from.
Wishful thinking. People love zombies.
Chris Balzano, that's his name. He wrote a book about it.
Chris Balzano.
So you're into zombies? There's stories about zombies. That's what he says.
And he's selling a book. Okay.
Oh, I guess you have to read his book too.
Oh, right. One thing that we didn't talk about yet is the ink blot. What's that called?
The Rorschach
Rorschach?
test?
Yeah. We did not talk about the fact that this Bridgewater Triangle has been compared to a Rorschach test.
What does that remind you of, everyone?
Skinwalker.
Oh, yeah.
Ranch?
Skinwalker Ranch and our favorite paranormal journalist, Ben Knapp. Is it Ben Knapp? It's Knapp. George Knapp. There it is. I got it.
George
I got
Knapp,
there.
yeah.
It's a Rorschach test. You see what you want to see.
And there are a ton of other ghost stories, but they all equate to, I felt like I was being watched, or I heard something in the distance, or there were drums, and there were screams in the distance, but no like real eyewitness accounts like there are for the redheaded hitchhiker.
Those non-specific ones are actually almost more believable to me than this whole, I saw a full body apparition and it chased me laughing and stuff. Like, that's less believable, but like, I was out in the woods and it started to feel really creepy, and then I heard screaming in the distance and then I ran away. Like, that's believable. Those minimalistic.
There's a full
Yeah, go ahead.
10-paragraph story about this guy that was in the art building alone at like 1 a.m, and the number one response is one line: I live in East Bridgewater. The high school is haunted as fuck too. I've been there pretty late because of football. I've seen some shit and heard some shit. I think his little one sentence here is more believable than that entire 10 paragraphs.
I love it. That's precious. That's awesome. And it's got the most upvotes, you're saying? So that resonated with everyone else too.
Yeah, it's the main one right there.
You know, I think there's something to that feeling of unease. That's a common denominator in all of these things. And I don't know if it's just, have you guys talked about the feeling of unease? And
We talked about it in Liminal Spaces.
oh, yes, that's right. Okay. I knew it was
Mhm.
familiar.
I think it's the way that people perceive the energy shift, and it makes people very uncomfortable. And when something is happening or something is building and something paranormal is about to happen, I think that's what people are sensing. And it's very uncomfortable for people who are not prepared to feel that. Like, I feel like Cameron could just live right through it.
Yeah, I'd be fine.
Yes, of course you would.
In Freetown State Forest, they say, we heard ritualistic drums and chanting one night. Another night, glowing orbs. that we thought were other people carrying lanterns or high-powered flashlights. However, there were no people upon checking it out, and they just faded away before our eyes. Never mind the screams. You would hear in the dead of the night, carried by the darkness, just screams off in the distance. That's Jebba Noy, 6 years ago, posting about the Freetown State Forest.
That's pretty crazy. I wouldn't want to be camping there.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a nice little homage to Massasoit. This is Metatron's father who kept the peace when the Pilgrims first landed at Plymouth Rock. So looking back, Massasoit might have felt like a savior to many within his tribe. He kept the people together in the face of disease, tribal warfare, and the English settlers. It's understandable they would associate that stone with him, and by this they mean Profile Rock. It's known to be, supposedly, it is the profile of Massasoit. But it was this recognition that may have trapped his son, Metatron, to remain at Profile Rock. After the death of his father, Metatron was forced to deal with intensifying problems with the English, other tribes, and his own people. He often came to the mountain to seek guidance. And just so it's clear, Profile Rock did have a spiritual significance pre-colonial times. Massasoit lived in the 1600s, but prior to the life of Massasoit, this rock was significant to the people. I don't know exactly when it got labeled as Massasoit's profile, but it was something very special to the people before then. Anyway, during the war, King Philip's War, it is said that he went to the rock to meditate and meet his war general, Anawan. That's the man who got the wampum belt. No doubt he felt some connection to the place many claimed looked like his father, but he may also have used it to remind the people of his bloodline. So this is to say that there was something about that, and Philip apparently, or Metatron apparently, spent a lot of time at this Profile Rock. So Patrick knew of Profile Rock from an early age. Aside from seeing it on the patches of the police in town, his father would bring him to the mountain when he went to paint landscapes of it. His father would sit for hours trying to capture the perfect emotion of the place, and Patrick would play with the rocks and try to climb the trees. So Patrick is saying this. He's the one who's been interviewed. So it's not a direct witness account from the man. It's the man's son, Patrick. My father was not an artist. He had taken some classes before, but he was a cook. Not at all what you would think of as a painter, but he loved that place. Patrick says his father would talk about being drawn in by the stone, but he could never really communicate why. He felt something there. He painted other things, but he always went back to Profile Rock. I don't think he ever got it right. He didn't know what he felt. He just felt it. It meant nothing to Patrick himself to climb the face of the stone. He had done it for as long as he could remember. In late 2001, the climb felt different. He says, I think it was the first time I knew what my father felt. All those times with him, and I always used the place as a playground. That day, though, I think I felt what he was trying to say with those paintings. As Patrick made it up the rock, carefully placing each foot as he went, he felt the air change around him. It became very warm, almost humid, and he found it hard to breathe. He looked up to see someone looking down at him. He said the man had dark skin and no hair. The man extended his arm as if to help Patrick up, but when Patrick looked down to make sure that his feet were secure, the man vanished. I don't know what I saw, but the whole thing seemed wrong. Well, not wrong as much as out of place. I never felt threatened, but I knew that I had seen a ghost. So that's a really interesting story about Profile Rock and supposedly what people think is Metatron, who's still there, still stuck at Profile Rock. I like that story.
That's a good story, yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, do we think the Bridgewater Triangle is an actual triangle, or is it just a collection of stories for financial
Tourist
gain?
revenue. Yes. I think that it's trying to put itself on the map, trying to stay relevant, and not even trying that hard anymore because a lot of these stories have died off, seems to be getting forgotten.
You know, there's not too many new stories about it. And you would think with the popularity of these kind of the dark tourism effect, there would be more stories now. And it really hasn't gone that way.
That's true.
Just the same stories circulating over and over again, blogged over and over again by paranormal people. And here we are
Guilty as charged.
doing it again.
Yeah.
Right. But I'd never heard of it, actually. And now I'm a little surprised because, come to find out, it's super famous.
But he has a rich history. I don't doubt that there is something going on there, but I don't think it's as big as they're pumping it up to be.
We totally didn't even talk about the satanic cults, did we? And
Yeah, and there are
and
satanic
there's
cults.
people
Yeah.
doing rituals there, sacrificing animals, and somebody died. Like bodies, human bodies were found there too, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, children, adults. They found human bodies there. There was a serial killer that tried to put off his murders onto the satanic
Right, he got
cults.
arrested, right?
So
I was going to
there
say.
were serial killers and satanic cults going on at the same time.
So that is such a good point, though, about the fact that there's been a lot of attention and a lot of retelling of the stories. And so you know that it's got to have increased the visitation of these places, and yet there are no new stories. And the stories have been getting told since at least a decade, right? 2013? Is that when the first big documentary of Bridgewater Triangle came out?
Recent, right? Because in the 70s,
Right.
that guy went out there and wrote his book, and it became a big deal. But then
I'm talking about like
2013.
Yeah, a revival
the
of
new
interest
documentary was
should have
released.
happened, I would think, but there have been no new
Right.
stories. So that is actually really
Mhm.
interesting. That's very interesting.
Right.
Even some of the newer stories are still old.
Yeah, they're like 20 years old. That does take some of it away. That takes some of the power away. 'Cause I'm inclined to think that there is something about the space. I think that it was seen as a sacred place before. It was seen as a place of spirits before. There's probably something there.
What if the satanic cult accidentally locked away the spiritual
Or
energy?
did something.
Oh, they closed the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, like their efforts were so
Heinous.
not sacred that it actually
Negated.
depleted that kind of sacred the power that was there.
The mojo that existed. I
Mhm.
mean, maybe it is interesting, and maybe there's something about it, like the locals.
Heinous Satanists.
It's a band
I'm
name.
sorry. Go ahead.
In their search for the paranormal, they actually closed the door on it.
I wonder if there's also, with the Satanists and the dead bodies there and stuff, I wonder if it's actually maybe it's become taboo for the locals to talk about. Maybe stuff is happening there and people don't want to talk about it because it is a very scary place still.
It would bring like a certain type of person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Well, if you think about it too, with the quote unquote Native American curse that could potentially be on the land because of what happened so long ago, that's why maybe people like that were drawn to the area. And that curse is supposed to remain upon that land until the belt that was given away is returned.
Maybe the belt was returned
Maybe,
It wasn't.
in secret.
maybe.
I feel like there would have been some pretty significant celebrations if the Wampanoag people had got that belt back.
Yeah,
It's a big deal.
yeah.
In your search, yeah, you would have found that.
They would have celebrated the shit out of that. Like that's, I mean, I suppose it could have happened, but
I was gonna say it wouldn't surprise me if it happened and we didn't know because we didn't look for that information. But you were looking.
it would be out
Kept
there.
it quiet from the white people.
I feel like they would have celebrated it though. That would be a really big deal and a triumph for the people, a recovery of a huge piece of culture,
Mhm.
a huge
Well,
piece
they
of
have
history.
celebrations that we never know about.
Yeah, but this is
Big meetings of like all the tribes that happen up in Flagstaff that we only hear about because I only heard about because I was working at the grocery store they would stop by before going.
they'd be teaching the kids though. They'd be teaching the other tribal members. It would have gotten talked about a lot. They talk a lot about the school and how they're reteaching the language and they're reteaching the culture. They talk a lot about the West Indies tribe that they found, the people that survived who are also Wampanoag, who were taken away in the slave trade after King Philip's War. Like there's a lot that I think this is something that I don't think would have been able to be kept quiet. And why would they want to? Because when it's public, it's protected. When it's
Right.
public, they can't lose it because it's out there in the open. We've got it. And it's not going to be, if it's secret, if it goes missing again, it's easy to hide. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it would be talked about. Okay. So I don't know. Did everybody get a chance to answer the question? Do we really think that something's happening at Bridgewater Triangle? Did everybody get a chance
Yes.
to say their opinion?
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
we did.
so.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Mhm.
All right then. Okay.
I-
So we'll probably,
And what was that? No, nothing.
I
Not
think
this
there's
triangle?
something there, but it is weird to me that there's not new stories being like Skinwalker Ranch has new shit happening all the time.
Right.
Even around Skinwalker.
Oh, I forgot. We
Mhm.
think maybe the heinous Satanist closed whatever.
That's the energy vortex of
energy,
goodness.
yes.
Right.
They made it neutral. They negated the
They
energy.
sullied it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the headline.
I don't know. That's Cameron's opinion. I don't know if
I didn't use the word heinous. You all did.
I just like the wording.
Yeah, I use the word heinous.
I did. Yeah, and I put them together because it's beautiful.
Until we get some sort of like actual proof of some of these things, like really good video or something that can't be questioned, it's still kind of up in the air. Are UFOs real? It's still circumstantial. Is Bigfoot real? It's still circumstantial.
Okay, fine. This is a paranormal podcast. What do you believe, JT? What do you believe despite lack of evidence?
What do I believe?
What is it?
What I believe changes from day to day, situation to situation. Do I believe that the swamp could be haunted and that there's hauntings that go around there? Yes, I do. I believe that. I believe there's spirits. I believe that there's a thin veil that can be crossed from time to time. I believe that, yes. Do I believe that there are aliens? Once upon a time I did, but I think it's more not necessarily aliens, but it could be a multitude of different things, interdimensional beings, beings that are so advanced that we just don't have the capability to understand what they are. That's what I believe skinwalkers are. They're interdimensional, not necessarily a person that turns into a werewolf, but it's an interdimensional thing based on what I've read.
Wrap it up.
You think
Say what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Do you
I
think
think
something's happening in
also
Bridgewater?
The stories that are being circulated are not compelling enough to you.
I think it's stories. I think it's stories. I would.
Okay, so no. Bridgewater specifically,
Right.
no. Okay.
It's just the one story about the Pukwudgie is compelling. Like that's the only story I read where I was like, holy crap, that's a really good story, because he retells it on the documentary, and he believes the story. He's like, this happened to me. This is the guy. So that's the only story that I'm like, okay, that's. And then the story of the bearded goat or the redheaded ghost is, I'm not going to go along that road. I'm just not going to see that guy. I'm going to stay away.
Nice play on words there. You're not going to go on that road, really?
I'm not going to go on that road.
Well, you can't see him if you don't go down that road.
Exactly. I'm not going to see the guy.
Right.
I'm going to stay away. I don't go into a dark bathroom and say Bloody Mary 3 times. So, I'm not gonna mess with stuff like that. So, it's anyway.
Maybe like what
Yeah, I won't
happens
do
if you
that
laugh back? Like what if you pretend he told a funny joke?
No, get all wide-eyed into your best cackles.
Cameron, I want you to do that. I want you to go to the road. I want you to find the guy, and when he starts cackling at him or at you, you just cackle right back, and I want to hear
I'll
a
go
report
with you.
about what he does. Just confuse the shit out of him. I think he'd probably stop.
Massachusetts trip.
I know.
I'll
Totally.
see you there.
I think Bridgewater Triangle is on the list of places that if we ever get successful and we have money for this podcast, that's
There's
where we go.
nothing
It's
like
gonna be one of our
actually
field
being in the
trips.
space and feeling it yourself.
He just told a dirty joke. Should we pick up hitchhikers when we go
No.
down there?
Absolutely not.
Well, no, because they might be heinous Satanists or serial murderers. Those are real.
You can go do that. I'll just hang back at the hotel.
Oh, but what if it's a redhead? What if it's a redhead in a plaid shirt?
If we see a redhead in
Get
a
a
plaid
picture.
shirt,
Well, he's a ghost. He picks the car, not us pick up
well,
him,
we're trying
right?
to pick
But
him
he
up,
picks
right?
the car.
Because we're trying to see
You
the
stand
thing.
still.
Oh, I
But you
thought
have
he
to
just-
stop. You have to pull over and let him in.
Yeah, you pick him up.
And then he disappears from your car.
I thought the one guy saw
He
him when
stares
he was
at you and
driving
smiles
60
for a
miles an
while.
hour, and the redheaded hitchhiker was pressed to his
He's
car.
only gonna appear to you if he
Okay.
wants to.
You're right.
But there was another one where they picked him up and then he disappeared from within the car.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
a mix
Yeah, I
of
remember
both.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah,
no. The answer is no.
yeah.
Because as Abby said, there is a chance it's a real actual person, and real actual people can
No.
kill you. So, no, not going to do it. Anyway, okay. So let's end this episode.
This was
yeah?
fun.
Did we have fun? I think it was a fun one to research.
Better that it's not
Mhm.
rushed.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was an interesting
Yeah.
subject to
This
research.
is- I'm glad we read
gold.
it.
It was-
This is gonna
it was
be
a lot of
better
good stories.
Episode.
It's gold.
Yeah.
I like the
All
structure.
right. Okay. Goodbye, listeners, and we hope you had as much fun as we did. This has been another episode of
The Wandering Crow.
Please, for the love of God, just get one good
Bye.
soundbite of that and then
No.
edit it in. No, we're
It
gonna
must
do
be
that every
terrible
time.
every time.
That's actually a really good idea.
The whole thing, it can't be in sync. It can't be